Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Brian Shaner. I'm the VP of Government Marketing here at Dun Bradstreet. Before we get started, just go over a couple of housekeeping issues for everybody, or housekeeping things. First of all, everybody that's attending is going to be on mute. We do want to make this a very dynamic conversation. So if you have questions, please use the question and answer section within the Zoom tool. I know our pictures may be on the right side of your screen over the title slide that you see there. We don't really have many slides today. It is really just a conversation where Eric's going to be sharing some lessons learned from what DNB has experienced as we've gone through our CMMC pre-assessment and prepping for our certification here. So if you want to move those, you can just click on the top of that and drag that over to the left so it's out of your way. Also, if you have any, like I said, if you have any questions, we want to use the Q&A function within the chat. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So again, my name is Brian Shaner. I'm VP of Marketing here at Dun Bradstreet, and Dun Bradstreet and QOMPLX announced back in January that they're going to be building a pre-assessment tool. And today what we wanted to do is talk about what Dun Bradstreet has really been doing on the pre-assessment side and how we're getting ready for our CMMC certification. So today we have Eric Eckwurzel. He's the CTO for Government Solutions for Dun Bradstreet. And so Eric, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Eric Eckwurzel. I'm the CTO of Government Solutions for Dun Bradstreet. I've been with Dun Bradstreet since 2001. The Government Solutions Division, this is for all federal, state, local, and some international government markets. And I'm looking forward to talking with you today about what we've done for CMMC and also to talk about the DNB QOMPLX partnership where we've put together some solutions in this space.
Great, thanks, Eric. So I know you got the invites you saw as an hour long. Really what Eric and I have talked about prepping is, we want to tell our story and, we think that, we know that that's why people are here, but ultimately I think there's going to be a lot of questions from the audience. So we're keeping our part of the presentation short. We're going to have a good, at least 25, 30 minutes worth of time available for questions and answers. So please get those questions in and everything like that. Now, to get us started and to kind of give us a feel for where the audience is, we have a quick poll question, really asking you about how prepared are you, where are you in regards to your CMMC preparation? So please go ahead and click that button and submit us, and we're going to see some real-time results on this. Okay, great. So it looks like the vast majority, Eric, are just really trying to learn about CMMC and everything, and there's about 50%, and then the other half mostly are just started or kind of in the midst of preparing for the audit. And good. So somebody is about 80% ready. That's awesome. So let's get into it and let's talk to Eric and see kind of where we are with things. So Eric, I know we've been preparing for CMMC. Can you give us an update on where things stand and what we've been doing?
Sure, I'd be glad to. And by the way, I applaud the two seminar attendees that are ready for an audit once the auditors are ready. That's not where Dun Bradstreet is. We are on our way. For Dun Bradstreet, we've identified the systems and the products that will contain CY. We've employed our internal security team to review how well we adhere to the CMMC framework for the identified systems. Of course, until we contract a CMMC certified third-party assessment organization, or it's a C3PAO, which I like to remember by just saying C3PO back from Star Wars days and just adding an A in the middle, of which there are none so far. We can't be CMMC certified, but the DoD encourages businesses to start self-assess in preparation for third-party certification, and that's exactly what we're doing. And I take it that everybody who's joined the seminar today is beginning to think about that or has already started on their journey, which is great. We're also evaluating CMMC level 4 and 5. We're obviously moving for CMMC level 3 for most of our systems and COI. But we're looking at CMMC level 4 and 5 for contracts where we anticipate may involve a higher level of security on our part, whether we're a prime contractor or a subcontractor, which is, something that most people know, but I'm not going to assume everybody knows. It doesn't matter whether you're a prime contractor or a subcontractor to a prime. If you're going to be a part of a contract with the DoD, where DoD requires CMMC certification to a certain level, whether you're the prime contractor or a subcontractor, or you're a subcontractor to those subcontractors all the way down, you're required to be certified. The other things we've done, which are really important, is we've established our CUI identification procedures with our legal team. And we've also established our RFP CUI identification procedures with our legal and our sales operations team. Because you can be ready for all of this, but one of the things that will come along is more data can come in, or more data may come along where there's going to be a question. Is it CUI data or is it not CUI data? And the answer isn't always very clear. So you need to up your game when it comes to you having your legal team become very good about that. Sometimes the RFP, if you're getting a contract from the DoD, is literally going to state the data we're providing you will be CUI, and therefore you have to protect it to a certain level. But then there might be data in your systems that's CUI and you're not even aware of it, and you need your legal team to be up to par with that type of stuff.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. So that's good. So I know the process. We're kind of going through it. What would you say are your biggest lessons learned going through this experience? You talked a little bit about legal here. I know there's a lot of other things that the audience would like to hear about today.
Yeah, one of the lessons learned, which I encourage everybody to do, is demystify the whole thing by just taking a look at the CMMC framework itself. If you Google CMMC version 1.02, which was released March 18th, and just read it, it's not a page turner. It's not super exciting, but there's a 10 pages of the framework. If you take out the introduction, you take out a lot of the other stuff, the actual 171 controls for all levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are summarized in a 10-page section. You can literally read it in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It's it's relatively plain English. There's some technical jargon in there, but not enough to throw anybody off. And just reading those 10 pages alone, plus some of the introduction pages and some of the pages after, it will just give you a really good sense of what the DoD is looking for and give you a good understanding. And I'm just going to read one off to you because everybody understands access control. Access control is one of the 17 areas that the CMMC framework deals with. And level 1, think of level 1 as limit access to authorized users. That basically means if you have a system that's going to have CUI data, does it have a username and a password? Is it properly handled? Level 2, limit use of portable storage devices. So you have to make sure you're not just letting anybody use the little devices that you can plug into your computer and pull data off of it. Level 3, automatically terminate user sessions. So if you have systems and you have products, do people get kicked off automatically after a certain amount of time or when certain things happen? Level 4, restrict remote network access based on originally defined risk factors. So that gets a little bit more complicated. Level 5, identify and mitigate risk associated with unidentified wireless access points. So you get the sense that as you move up to the levels from basic to very sophisticated, in each of these different 17 areas, you need to pay attention to more and more cybersecurity issues. But I guess my point is, what I learned was just becoming familiar with the document will help you to demystify what this whole thing's all about. The other one, which I mentioned before, Brian, was engaging legal and contracting to establish those procedures for continuously identifying CUI. The way we've done it with DMB is we have a core internal legal system, but they're not experts. So they've contracted an external expert when it comes to CUI. And if they can't figure out if it's CUI, they will reach out to the third-party expert in order for them to help determine whether or not something is or is not CUI. And whether something is or is not CUI, it's not as if the data itself inherently is CUI, Brian. It can also be something that you or I might feel is not controlled, unclassified information. But just the fact that that piece of information comes from the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense defines it as being controlled classified information, makes it controlled unclassified information. So it can be CUI in one contract, but not CUI in another. It's not, it's something you need to be able to determine and figure out. The other thing is that you really want to, I would strongly encourage you to use a CMMC pre-assessment tool, just like the one Dun Bradstreet in partnership with QOMPLX is building later this quarter. So we'll get into that a little bit later, of course. And finally, you should consider engaging a non-certified third-party assessment organization who plans to be certified, right? There's no point in engaging one that doesn't plan to be CMMC certified once that becomes available later this year, to help you make sure that your cybersecurity that your cybersecurity is up to speed, so it won't be something you're facing at the last minute, Brian.
That's great. So Eric, I know we've talked about a lot of the things that we've learned. I think one of the things that I know when I do projects, there's always this kind of one big hill I had to climb or whatever. What would you say has been your biggest challenge, and what kind of advice would you give the audience to help maybe overcome that?
Yeah, right now there are about 20,000 contractors that are, they're doing the right thing and they're NIST 800-171 compliant. And depending on your size or how large you are as an organization, and even if you're a small organization, if you've been a DoD contractor, or even if you aren't formally a DoD contractor, but you plan to be, or you plan to be answering or responding as a subcontractor, those things, you probably have invested some time, money, and effort to get your cybersecurity landscape up to some degree of certification. I know Dun Bradstreet has invested quite a bit to be NIST 800-171 certified. But the biggest challenge I've had, Brian, is to sit down with security and say, look, we need to up our game once again, right? And it's not just the security team, which is really a good ally of mine. It's the teams that are the technical teams that are in charge of the products and the systems, the product teams that are in charge of the products. They don't really want to invest a lot of time in sprints and development cycles, going back again to even further harden the systems and the products. But that's what they've got to do. And, whether you're a small or medium-sized organization or even a large company like Dun Bradstreet, you need to work with the people who are in charge of these systems and make sure that they're doing what they need to do to add the parts of the framework that didn't exist in this 800-171. There actually aren't a lot of them, which is the good news, but there are some important ones, and those have to be addressed, and you need to be ready for those. So even if you're NIST 800-171, and you've done all your POAMs tied to NIST 800-171, and you're at that level, you have some more homework to do, and it's getting all those people to do that work, Brian.
Okay, that's great, Eric. Good insights there. I think one of the other things that we've talked about, and I know we're working with QOMPLX to put out a pre-assessment tool, and you mentioned that as far as a lesson learned. Was wondering if you could talk a little bit more just about how you see the pre-assessment assessment tool helping companies go through this process to become certified, and if you can just give us an update on where that stands and how that could be used and what benefit that's going to bring to the audience.
Yeah, sure. So we've been working with QOMPLX since last fall, and we announced our partnership in January. The CMMC pre-assessment tool itself, it's a little bit like TurboTax. You answer the questions, and the application essentially prepares a template document for submission at the level that you're seeking. You can use it for multiple levels. And your CMMC certified third-party assessment organization, they can obviously maybe edit or add artifacts and so forth. But filling it out should enable you to better negotiate with these C3PAOs once they're available. And they're certified by the CMMC accreditation board. Because My personal experience in working with former third-party organizations that are essentially doing these assessments. Of course, in the past, these were for NIST 800-171. We did our internal work, but then we contracted a third party to make sure that our internal work was done properly. Their price estimates are definitely based on, part of it is based on their perception of your familiarity with the CMMC framework. In our case, it was NIST 800-171 at the time, and also their assessment of how organized you are with your documents. So, using something like DNB and QOMPLX's CMMC pre-assessment tool will help you to get organized for those conversations and get ready for your submission to the government. And also, just like TurboTax, there's a point in the assessment. I don't know if you've used TurboTax, but whenever I use TurboTax, every year there's a button where you can push, you say, what's the likelihood you're going to be audited, based on the information you've submitted? And it takes into account who you are. I don't know what else it takes into account. Probably your financial credit score, God knows what else it does. But it takes into account all this information plus the information you've uploaded and evaluates the likelihood that you're going to be audited. The Dun Bradstreet complex CMMC pre-assessment tool, there's a point where after you've loaded all your documents and so forth, there's a cybersecurity score that we make available to you that's been designed by complex and Dun Bradstreet data scientists to help you understand how well you fare and how much work you're likely going to have to put in order to become CMMC certified.
Okay, great. All right. So Eric, we have a few questions. One of the questions we have just is, are the levels attributed to the levels within CMC? Are they attributed to the contract award value? Based on what you said, it sounds more like the levels are based on just the amount of thoroughness you have to go through with your security protocols, not necessarily the amount of the contract. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not based at all on the award value. It's based solely on whether or not the DoD contract involves passing controlled unclassified information. And I should pause here. The word unclassified is a little unfortunate in my mind. Controlled unclassified information literally means information and data that the DoD considers to have to be in some way protected. So it's going to leave DoD and possibly go into a contractor's hands, and that's what makes it unclassified, because it was classified, it would have to stay within DMB's firewalls and a contract would have to go inside. But this is data that it has to be protected, even though it's going to leave DoD's firewalls. And then the DoD is saying, okay, prime contractor, I'm passing you this information, but now you have to be certified to be able to protect it. And you either have to be certified at CMMC level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And then if you in turn take that same data and pass it to your subcontractor, that subcontractor is to be certified. It has nothing to do with award value. It has to do with whether or not you're receiving controlled unclassified information that has to be protected at level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And then whether or not you're passing that to a subcontractor.
Okay. We have another question here about funding and resources. So what funding and resources should companies expect to allocate for the CMMC process and maintaining certification? I think that's kind of independent of the company. So you want to speak to that?
I'd be glad to. So, the DoD is definitely sensitive to the fact that there's up to 300,000 companies that are going to need to be certified at some level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And, so the level that you need to be certified for in order to participate in a particular contract, the level is going to be one factor that determines the cost and the burden and cost. So the higher the level, the higher the cost it's going to be for you to be able to make sure your cybersecurity framework, your CMMC level framework is in good shape. The second factor is going to be the complexity of the systems that you manage in your company. So you could be a very small company, but if you're a very small company that has a massive artificial intelligence infrastructure with lots of data that's moving around inside of it, and you're mixing it with lots of data. You have a lot of data that you need to classify in terms of CUI or not, what systems it touches. It could be fairly expensive. On the other hand, if you're a company that's really simply receiving a very small amounts of CUI information and very limited controlled systems, then your costs are likely going to be a lot lower. But it's going to be driven by the complexity of your systems, your products, and the technology that you bring to bear to any given contract, and the level. That's really what it's all about.
Okay, great. All right, our next question is, for level 3, it seems to be a requirement to centrally collect a lot of logs and have a way to kind of get the important logs from all the noise. Any comments on that, about how they might be able to do that? Or is that something we want to, what do you think there?
I don't have I don't have any really deep solutions or recommendations that I can provide you in this for this particular question.
Okay. So for the person that asked that question, if you want to go ahead and put in the Q&A and get some contact information, maybe we can reach out to you and give you some additional thoughts offline there. Okay. One of the questions that Vinny asked was, would we be able to provide the link to the 10-page CMMC? Yeah, so Vinny, I think one of the other questions I saw was, are we going to record this? We are recording this. What we'll do is we'll not only send out a link to this webinar, but we'll also go ahead and include this link to the control list that was mentioned by Eric earlier in that follow-up email. So you guys can look for that, okay? All right, it looks like Brad has a question here about mentioning the CUI through your legal team. And if I kind of interpret this right, small businesses won't have the legal resources. I think really there's still some requirements being mapped out that we're still trying to, we have the requirements, but we're waiting on the auditors to kind of get all the protocols in place and everything. It sounds like this might be a place where a good pre-assessment tool would help with that. Am I on the mark with that, Eric, or?
You are, because I wouldn't recommend that you try to go through and look at all of the data that you're dealing with and determine whether or not it's CUI or not CUI. That certainly could be a very onerous thing. What's the more likely scenario is that if your prime contractor is going to receive a request for proposal for a contract, and you may want to bid as a subcontractor, as a small company, or as a prime contractor. And when you do that with the DoD is going to make it clear in the RFP if the prime and the subcontractors need to be certified at a certain level in order to participate in that contract. Now, so trying to figure out whether or not the data that you're going to be dealing with as a part of that contract is considered to be CUI or not CUI may end up being an open and shut case. In cases where it's not very clear, and I'll give you an example. An example might be that you're a subcontractor who is looking to provide nuts and bolts for a particular system or a weapon system, for example. Now, if you're going to receive the blueprints for that weapon system, you don't really need to go to a lawyer. That's CUI. If you're going to receive specifications for the nuts and bolts, it's got to be 3/4 inch long. The thread type is supposed to be ABC. Then you're able to look at that particular specification and determine whether or not you might want to engage with your prime contractor or your contractor who you're vending to, and to determine if that information would be considered to be where you require CMMC level 3 certification, for example. You may not. So doing the submissions in terms of putting together your systems, that's really, Brian, slightly different, which is if you want to be ready in case CUI data comes your way, then you can simply submit the information to the pre-assessment tool, and we'll help you determine whether or not you can handle CUI data that's protected by CMMC level 3.
Okay.
So you know, it's a chicken egg thing. You can decide whether or not you want to simply harden your systems to be able to handle CUI data at the CMMC level 3 level. And then if you do that, your need to determine what is CUI and what isn't CUI, that burden goes down.
Great. Okay. So we have a question here from William. You know, do you have cost estimates for becoming level 3? I think we've already kind of addressed that a little bit. I think it's going to be dependent kind of on their situation, what they're doing, and how complex their environment is. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, no, it is one of the #1 questions that people have been asking. How much is it going to cost me to become CMMC level 3 certified? And for CMMC level 3 certification, it's the dimensions that I described earlier, Brian.
Okay, great. You know, Bill has a question here about with so many small contractors working remote and from home now, you know, how does CMMC impact the home-based workers? I mean, to me, I think it's really about the security of the connections and whatnot, but you know, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that or.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily, if you read through the CMMC security framework, it's not that they had to pivot at all. So I'll give you an example. If you're using a computer and you're in a remote location, there are already specifications inside of some of the 17 areas that deal with remote connections to your system. And those requirements at the CMMC level 3, 4, and 5, there aren't that many at the level 1 and 2, but at the level 3, 4, and 5, specify how your computer, which is sitting at your home, you know, in your home, at your desk in your home office, needs to be protected, how the connection between your computer and your servers at work need to be protected, and everything in between. So that stuff's already in there. They didn't have to change anything. So I suppose that's a way of saying that they've anticipated that work is done remotely, whether it's done from your home office or from some satellite office.
Okay, great. All right. We have a question here from Judy about where can I find the list of organizations that are planning to be authorized to perform the vendor certifications. Judy, I think you're asking for the list of the C3PA. Yeah, that acronym that I can never say straight because I'm like you, C3PO all the time, right? C3PAOs for that and whatnot. I think we're still waiting to get those at this point. So
well, there's a little bit there though. I would say that you're talking about the control requirements for 800.171, right, Brian? That was the.
No, Judy was asking for the organizations that are going to be authorized to actually perform the audits, if I understand her question. And I know we're still waiting to find out who those are because there's no approved.
The place where you're going to want to watch is the. It's essentially called it's the CMM. It's the. I'll get it in a second here. It's essentially the CMMC accreditation board, CMMC AB. That's why I was like the AB. I would have to remember what the AB is. But what is the DoD has assigned a third-party nonprofit organization, CMMC accreditation board, and if you just look them up on the internet. They're the ones that will be doing the accreditation work to determine which third-party assessment organizations will become certified to provide these third-party assessments of your company. So right now what's happening is third-party assessments organizations, a lot of them that used to do NIST 800.171 work, they're signing up with the CMMC accreditation board and raising their hand and saying, hey, I want you to certify me. The accreditation board will be responsible for certifying those third-party assessment organizations. And then once those third-party assessments organizations are available, you will be able to go back to the CMMC accreditation board and see the list of companies that you can reach out to that are certified. And as those become certified, you can then begin to negotiate with them to have them review your documentation, which, setting up that documentation through, Dun Bradstreet and QOMPLX's CMMC pre-assessment tool is sort of a great way to start that process.
Okay. Eric, I just, thank you. So we're at the bottom of the hour. One of the things I was just looking at my list here, and one of the things we do have a short survey just to kind of help us with letting us know if this content is helpful. We're going to continue the Q&A, but you're going to see a quick little poll pop up on there, just, giving us some feedback so we know, are we in the right direction? Are we providing the right feedback and information you're looking for when you signed up to come here? So if we go ahead and get that up, Eric, it looks like the next question, there's two of them talking about the 800-171. So it looks like, the talks about the control requirements for 800-171, and there's some questions about what documents will tell you what controls to audit against, et cetera. You want to speak to those?
Yeah, for the control requirements for the 871, the level 3 accreditation and so forth, what I recommend you do is Google CMMC V1.02, which was released March 18th. And there's on.mil, look for the .mil link. And on that is literally the level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and all of the controls that are required. There are a lot of companies, by the way, who've created cross matrices between, okay, this is what NIST 800-171 is, this is what CMMC is, here's the comparison chart, and so forth. You can go those, but just take it with a grain of salt. That are those completely up to date? Are they ready? It's definitely, you're much safer going to a pre-assessment tool like the one we've described to you, where it's our responsibility to make sure that every control for CMMC level 1 or every control for CMMC level 2 all the way through 5 is there, and you simply, like TurboTax, fill it out and answer the questions and provide what documents it asks for. And that will ensure that you are actually looking at whether or not you meet the particular controls and security levels that are required. So go, Google V.102 for CMMC, and also, use the tool that we're releasing later this quarter.
Okay. Yeah, speaking about the tool that we have, we also have with us today Bill Solms. He's the president of Government Solutions at QOMPLX. Bill, there was a question asking about the tool itself. If we have what's the timeline and the pricing estimate for the pre-assessment tool. So thanks for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, just to give you a little info about the tool itself and the way that we've designed it. As you go through the interactive process of responding to the control questions, because the CMMC process and the audit are designed on your responses to a number of control questions that build from level 1 all the way up to level 5. And so as you look at the tool and you answer it control question by control question, the pre-assessment tool that we have, and we have, and we're marketing with our partner, Dun Bradstreet, is that it'll show you the control question. It shows you the specific piece of the regulation that defines that question. It then gives you some suggested responses that have been developed by our highly experienced government compliance experts to say, hey, this is what a good answer or a full and sufficient answer would look like for what the auditors will likely be checking for. And so it gives you a good idea whether or not your response is going to meet the rigorous check by the government auditors. And then it allows you to upload a document or an artifact in support of that. And as Eric said, before, then it organizes all your responses. If there's anywhere you feel that you haven't measured up or you haven't met the requirement, it organizes those separately to put a POAM package together for you. But so then it takes that information plus any supporting documentation, has it organized so you can transmit that or hand the package to the auditor. Just wanted to add a little clarity there because as you heard Eric talk, he talks about sort of the tax assessment software analogy, where it takes you through and asks you some questions and kind of shows you what right looks like and allows you to be better prepared for your assessment. So we're looking at a release about the 1st of September. We're in the final stages of confirming that with all those involved. As I said, it's a joint. This is a joint solution with Dun Bradstreet. So it's, but that's our expectation. We're working hard to keep the costs down because there's a lot of small companies out there that are new to this and don't have extensive IT staffs. And so we're trying to make it affordable. But it's also important to note what it is and what it is not. This is not going to then tell you how to fix your problems, right? We're not offering, at this point anyway, a consulting service to walk you through and answer those questions and help you fix the problem. This is a pre-assessment tool where you fill in answers to the questions that we've sort of held your hand where necessary to explain the question and then show you what it kind of answer the government would consider is likely to consider satisfactory, and then gives you a greater sense of confidence that you're ready, and then organizes it all together. So it's a long-winded answer to your question. I apologize for that. But just gives you the right context, gives you the timing, roughly a month from now. And you'll be seeing a bunch more marketing on this, I'm sure, to let you guys know. I think it's, as a former, business owner and a former CEO of a public company that worked for DoD, this is, I think, going to be a very helpful tool to an awful lot of the folks out there in the defense industrial base who may not be sure exactly where they stand right now, or may not fully understand the control questions. And so we're looking forward to helping you understand that and to get ready and to be successful in passing your audit.
Great. Thanks, Bill. We have a couple of questions about timeline. So 2026 is when people need to be compliant.
20 what?
26.
Well, no. Eric, did you want to answer that one, or I could answer that one?
Yeah, either one of us is fine. You go for it.
So just to add a little clarity there, and I know Eric knows this answer as well. They're starting to roll out the CMMC requirements this November. So some contracts will require a CMMC certification as early as this November. They're going to ramp that up each year with the rollout complete by 2026.
Yeah,
there are lots of companies that are going to need it really soon. In our interaction with the CMMC AB that Eric spoke about, he expected that at least 6,000 companies would be seeking this certification next year, or the next federal FY rather. So just want to avoid any misconception about when it's required. Every single DoD contract will require it by 2026.
Yep.
Most of them will require it before then. So we're advocating, obviously, that folks not wait too late to get started.
So, yeah, exactly. Yeah, sooner the better. Yeah,
I wanted to clear up one. There was one question that came through about NIST 80171 certification. I did misspeak. We're not certified because you can't be. What NIST 80171 is a different framework, but it's an important subject to talk about. The big difference between NIST 80171, aside from the list of controls, is that CMMC, you have to be certified by a third party. You can't do a self-assessment and say, we believe we are, secure. And this is all the things, if we're audited, you have to be prepared for an audit. So what Dun Bradstreet did is we didn't want to wait for the government to come along and possibly audit us. We paid a third-party auditor to say, hey, we believe we're NIS 800-171 compliant. Can you audit us and tell us and give us some assurance that we are, right? Most people, I won't say most, a lot of people did go do that. Some people just did it internally if they were a DoD. The big difference with CMMC is you have no choice. If you want to participate in a DoD contract, which requires CMMC certification, you have to be certified by a CMMC certified third-party assessment organization, which in turn has to be certified by the CMMC AB accreditation board. So it's essentially locking all of that down, plus adding some controls, adding some differences in the controls. So thanks for that question.
Yeah, and Eric, I think there was another question later on about does it matter what level that needs to be accredited? And I think you addressed that no matter what level you're going for, there's that third-party check that goes through that.
It does, yeah, it doesn't matter what level, you have to have a third-party check.
Yeah.
Whether it's level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. All right, so yeah, I don't know about this one here, but it says here, what do you expect will be done to continuously monitor ongoing CMMC compliance of contractors from the government side, or will it just be done, it'll be like you do it once and you won't get checked again until your renewal?
Right. So the current published model is you will have to be recertified every 3 years. There's been a lot of debate both in industry and at the DoD for this. What's too onerous for industry? What's the right security posture? But right now, unless the rule changes, the DoD is saying you would need to be recertified every 3 years.
Yeah, and there was a comment here that says, my competitor is telling people they are CMC compliant today. Can you certify me as CMC level 3 compliant today, or can I self-certify? And I know the answer to that is no, but you want to talk a little bit about that?
I hope they weren't duped. I mean, this is a big concern about DoD. There are people out there who are saying that they can certify you. That's not true. There's nobody. Go to the CMMC accreditation board and look to that nonprofit organization, as well as the DoD itself, to determine when these contractors are in fact certified and available for certification. The best you can do, and the DoD recommends this, is do your own self-assessment and use tools like the one that Bill described from Dun Bradstreet and QOMPLX to be ready, right? So we are working to be CMMC level 3 ready. And we're looking forward to contracting a third-party, an accredited third-party assessment organization. But you can't say you're CMMC certified today. It's literally impossible at this point in time.
Yeah, because they don't have anybody to come and check you yet. And I think the timing we saw on that, yesterday was winter or early of 2021 is when they're going to have those approved, is what I think I saw on their website just yesterday.
That's right. The winter, which November, December, if you think of that as winter, is when they want to begin the process of training those organizations and making them available for contract.
Great. Hey, Bill, another question came in about the tool here. What controls will the pre-assessment tool, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, what controls the pre-assessment tool's compliance, and how are we going to know it's current and compliant?
Right. So the pre-assessment tool takes the control questions, and as I said, it goes from level 1 with a smaller number and then adds up all the way to CMMC level 5. Those control questions come straight from the government. So it's straight from the regulation. And you're literally answering the same questions that you will have to answer to the auditors when you get certified. We're constantly updating our assessment of those. We have some pretty highly experienced government security and compliance experts that have written the draft answers. In other words, we point to the actual question the government will be asking you. We point to the actual piece of the regulation that explains that control question. That's all straight from DoD, okay? Then the parts where we say, and this is what a good answer should look like. These are the things that it should include. These are the things that you're going to be asked to answer. Comes primarily straight from the government's question itself. And we have our experts, their previous careers in DoD in various organizations, and also certifications in CMMC itself. So you can count on those control questions being exactly the same questions that you're going to be asked by the auditor. And one last thing I wanted to say about the continuous monitoring question, it's a slightly different nuance, I think, than what we talked about earlier. The government has mandated a continuous monitoring requirement once you get your certification, once you pass your audit. The CMMC AB actually released an RFP earlier this year for a system to monitor, to conduct the continuous monitoring on those who had been approved. Essentially, the reason they did this was if a company passed their CMMC audit, but then had some sort of breach or change in status of one of the controls that could negatively impact whether they were still meeting the certification requirements, the government wanted to make sure that they were aware of that. So it'll be some sort of continuous monitoring. They haven't awarded the contract yet. If they do award that or choose another way to do it, but there is a requirement well, the way they phrased it was, we wanted to let all the OSCs, the organizations seeking certification, know that the government will be monitoring them. And so we recommend, and DNB, recommends, some sort of internal continuous monitoring, as most organizations do already.
Okay. A couple other quick questions here, Bill. It looks, somebody wanted to know if the tool was a client-based or SaaS model.
It's a SaaS model.
Yeah, and somebody was asking here if there was a beta for the tool, or would there be a limited trial before the purchase?
There is a beta trial. Right now, Dun Bradstreet is controlling and determining, which companies are going to be authorized to take part in that. So I'm happy to shove that back in DNB's direction to manage that task.
Yeah. So, Jason, if you're interested, just shoot us a note and we can take it under and we'll discuss it and get back to you on that.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see here. The questions keep coming and the list gets longer and longer. So I'm going to try to get to as many of these as we can. We got about 10 more minutes. So I'm just trying to go through here and make sure we get some of the things that I see that are coming up a lot. I've seen a few questions about this will the CMC requirements eventually be flowed down to large system integrator supply chain or to other, I think, companies is kind of the direction these questions are going. So, based on what I've heard, I think, the intent is that everybody's watching the DoD, but, if Eric, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's, if you look at the DoD right now, there's approximately 7,000 prime contractors, and there's approximately 250 to 300,000 subcontractors that are underneath those prime contractors. And these will flow down from day one. So if you are going to be managing CUI as a subcontractor, as a part of, reporting to a prime or a sub of that sub and so forth, then those are all going to be requirements. The CMMC, you will have to be CMMC certified. All up and down the supply chain. It will all flow down.
Okay. Sorry, Eric, I'm just still going through these and making sure we've captured a lot of these here. We answered that. I think one of the questions I did see, I think we might want to talk to is kind of what's a time frame for an organization, and I guess it's it's dependent on if there are maybe a smaller organization or you're going level 1 or level 3. do you maybe have some like general guidelines maybe we could share, or some thoughts maybe on what it might take if you're kind of like, level 1, level 3, or level 5 or something to that effect? I know it's so dependent, so I didn't know if you had anything.
The best way again is to literally go to the requirements, or go to the pre-assessment tool and try level 1 and try level 3. You will quickly understand the difference, and the difference is market. The DoD really wants level 1 to be pretty basic, and things that every company should be doing to make sure that they're not, that their cybersecurity is in good shape, but pretty basic, right? The analogy I've heard, which is a little bit of an exaggeration, is if you're mowing the White House lawn, you should be CMMC level 1, right? But that's kind of, but you get my point. CMMC level 1 is more than that, but it's pretty basic. What's interesting is CMMC level 2. I'm not quite sure how many contracts will require CMMC level 2, and it's more likely you'll have to be CMMC level 1 or CMMC level 3. So I would not recommend aiming for CMMC level 2, as the amount of business you can get from the government is pretty limited if you're CMMC level 2. Level 3 is a good step up. It requires some work. And then 4 and 5 are going to be a very small part of the contracting population, dealing with more of the what you would think of today as top secret type stuff, data that obviously not top secret because it's a classified category, but the data that the government's very concerned about protecting. Controlled and classified information, the government's very concerned about protecting.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, we're kind of at time and everything. So I've got one last question I want to talk to. I think is a really good way to wrap up. Somebody was asking, we talked about the CUI. What else can people start doing in addition to creating those procedures to get ready for CMMC certification?
Use a pre-assessment tool. I think aside from the things I talked about, which is engage your legal team, if you have one, or engage a third-party legal entity, and start to assess whether or not you feel they really understand what CUI is or CUI is not. I do think there's going to be a supply-demand issue that comes up in 2021 and 2022. And what I mean by that is there's going to be a very small number of certified organizations, and there's going to be a large and growing demand. So lining up and trying to find third-party organizations who are planning to be certified, and seeing if you could get them to agree to evaluate your company. I would start that process now, get them lined up so that when they are certified, you kind of get first dibs on them before you're competing with hundreds of companies for their attention, is something that I would highly recommend you do to keep your costs down.
Okay.
So.
Bill, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I would just reinforce what Eric said. To be honest, I think using a pre-assessment tool like ours or one of the others, obviously I prefer ours, really is a good chance for you to assess where you are and prioritize what actions, if any, you need to take to be ready to pass the audit. I mean, as Eric mentioned before, we're not giving you the audit. We're not saying you're going to pass. We're helping you get ready. We happen to know an awful lot about this, and so it's a very credible sort of opinion that you get back. But use a tool like that to help you get ready and prioritize your actions. You don't want to waste time. You don't want to waste effort. And you also want to know if there's something out there flapping that you didn't realize that could be a risk to you passing CMMC at the level that you want. So I would recommend do a pre-assessment soon and then use that to drive your follow-on actions.
Great. All right. Just one last thing here. I saw one last question come in. I just want to reiterate that, being CMMC certified, those requirements will start appearing in contracts later this year, early next year. But then by 2026, all contracts will require it. So really your kind of timeline for getting certified is predicated on what contracts you're going to compete on and serve for. So the sooner the better is definitely the approach we recommend.
Well, the other way, Brian, I just want to mention on that is that if you're an early bird to the CMMC certification, you're not going to have a lot of competition for the RFPs that come out that do require it.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
You'll have a competitive advantage.
Yes. Absolutely. No, that's a good point, Eric. All right. So on behalf of myself, Eric and Bill, thank you all for joining our webinar. We have a couple follow-ups that we'll be sending out. We'll get you a link to the webinar. We'll get you a couple of the links that Eric talked about as well. And again, on behalf of Dun Bradstreet and QOMPLX, thank you all very much for joining us today. We'll be sending out a follow-up email, and we're going to be hosting some additional webinars, as Bill mentioned, talking more about the tool itself, how the pre-assessment would work, and how it's going to be able to help you move forward with CMMC certification. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.